We are diving into a 19th century masterpiece that I think perfectly captures the feeling of 21st century anxiety. It's Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment.
It really does. If you've ever felt the pressure of just one single, overwhelming idea, this book is for you.
It's way more than just a novel, isn't it? It's like a psychological thriller and a philosophical deep dive all rolled into one.
Absolutely. Dostoevsky takes us right inside the mind of Rodion Raskolnikov, a man who gets this idea in his head that he has the right to commit any crime.
And he decides to test that belief with a truly horrifying act.
A horrifying act.
So our mission today is to cut through all the dense Russian context and just get straight to the most compelling parts, the psychological stuff. We want to understand how Dostoevsky explores this enigma of crime.
And, the destructive power of just thinking too much, of letting a theory run your life.
Exactly, and the suffering that inevitably follows.
It's really a moral dissection. Raskolnikov isn't driven by simple greed or anything like that. He's trying to apply this revolutionary and monstrous theory to the real world.
And the whole story really hangs on that tension, doesn't it? This idea becomes, as the book says, a fearful, frenzied, and fantastic question in his mind.
A question that demands an answer, even if it rips his soul apart.
Okay, so let's unpack Raskolnikov himself first. When we meet him, he's living in what the text calls a hole in that awful little cupboard of his.
Yeah, that description is so vivid. He's a former student, he's always on edge, irritable, and just drowning in his own poverty and, I think, his intellectual arrogance.
The poverty is key.
It's crucial, but it's what he builds on top of it that really matters. He sort of formalizes his desperation into this grandiose theory.
The one he gets published in an article, right?
Exactly, the one Porphyry later uncovers. It basically divides all of humanity into two groups. You have your ordinary people who have to obey the law.
And then you have the extraordinary ones.
The extraordinary men, the Napoleons. And he believes they have an ethical right to step over the line, to transgress, even to commit murder, if it's for some greater purpose.
And this idea just grows and grows in him. But his surroundings, they kind of pour fuel on that fire. The suffering he sees every day gives his terrible theory this twisted logic.
It really does. I mean, Dostoevsky gives us the Marmeladov family to show just how low things can get. Raskolnikov finds the father, a drunken clerk, in a tavern.
Marmeladov.
Right, and he's just this tragic figure. He admits he suffers twice as much because he drinks, and he confesses to selling his wife's personal things, her stockings, a shawl, just for vodka.
It's just agonizing to read, and that desperation, it leads to the ultimate family sacrifice.
It leads to Sonia.
Yeah.
Sonia, his daughter. She's described as so gentle, soft voice, pale face, but she carries the entire family. To feed her stepmother and the kids, she gets what they call a yellow ticket.
Which means she's a registered prostitute.
She's a prostitute. She sells her soul for a few rubles so her family doesn't starve.
And this is where Raskolnikov's psychology gets so fascinating. He sees this profound suffering, and his first instinct is actually generous. He gives them his last few coins.
But then, almost immediately, that generosity is just poisoned by his contempt. He despises himself for being kind and then just scoffs at all of humanity.
He mutters that line, "Man grows used to everything, the scoundrel."
Exactly. He doesn't really see Sonia's sacrifice with compassion. He sort of laughs malignantly and sees her situation as a mine they've dug there, and everyone is just making the most of her suffering.
So in his head, he's connecting the dots. He sees Sonia's situation and thinks, well, if this is what it takes to survive, then surely one little murder to fix the whole system is justified.
Precisely. His arrogance just blinds him. He replaces any real moral responsibility with this flawed, terrible arithmetic.
So, driven by that idea, he finally decides it's time to make his experiment. And he picks his victim, Alyona Ivanovna, the old pawnbroker.
And his justification is just chillingly cold. He calls her a sickly, stupid, ill-natured old woman, a vile, noxious insect. He sees killing her as simple arithmetic.
One life for 100. He thinks one tiny crime will be wiped out by thousands of good deeds.
A purely rational, calculated act.
But if the theory was so rational, why was the murder itself? Or completely botched?
Because that's Dostoevsky's whole point. Theory can never survive contact with messy reality, or with a human conscience. He plans this surgical strike, but it ends in a horrifying double murder.
Right, because he doesn't just kill Alyona.
No, in a panic, he also kills her half-sister, Elizaveta, who just happens to walk in at the worst possible moment. The whole thing is impulsive and chaotic.
And it doesn't fill him with triumph, it just fills him with fever and delirium. He hides the stolen stuff, some trinkets, a purse under a rock, but the psychological weight hits him instantly.
Yeah, he gets sick, starts muttering about chains in his socks, just completely losing it.
And the first consequence he faces isn't this grand moral reckoning.
No, it's something utterly trivial. He gets a summons to the police station, not for murder, but for an IOU to his landlady.
And the stress of that, just that little administrative task, almost breaks him. It shows you how shot his nerves are.
Right. Even though he feels this quick flash of triumph when he realizes they don't know about the murders, he's just unraveling.
And while he's collapsing on the inside, the outside world keeps piling on. His mother and sister, Dunya, arrive.
And Dunya is engaged to this man, Pyotr Petrovich Luzhin. He's older, about 45, and described as morose and somewhat conceited.
Luzhin is such a brilliant character. He's like a different kind of monster from Raskolnikov.
He really is. Raskolnikov is a theoretical tyrant, but Luzhin is a purely materialistic one. He has this awful, cynical philosophy. He even says he wants to marry a poor girl because it's more profitable.
He believes everything rests on self-interest. He takes these new economic ideas and just twists them into this justification for being a terrible person. He calls it economic truth.
And Raskolnikov, for all his own monstrous ideas, is completely disgusted by it.
It's like he recognizes a worse kind of nihilism in Luzhin.
Exactly. And he rejects the marriage instantly. He tells Dunya, it's me or Luzhin. He's trying to save her from a kind of moral murder.
And as if that's not enough drama, the ultimate shadow figure shows up.
Svidrigailov, the man who previously disgraced Dunya. He shows up right after his wife has died under suspicious circumstances.
And he offers Dunya a ton of money to break it off with Luzhin, but his intentions are just creepy.
It's isn't it?
Oh, totally.
Oh.
He's Raskolnikov's other dark mirror. He's a man who has already embraced transgression, but with none of the intellectual theory. He's not trying to justify it. He just is vile.
The moment Svidrigailov arrives, the whole story shifts. It's not just about the crime anymore. It's about the psychological chase. And that's where we meet the examining lawyer, Porfiry Petrovich.
Ah, Porfiry. He's the real genius of the book, I think. He's the perfect counterforce to Raskolnikov's intellect. He has no real evidence.
None at all.
He relies purely on psychological tactics. He brings up Raskolnikov's old article about extraordinary men and just uses his own intellectual vanity against him.
It's the way he talks, too. All this, like, vague, empty chatter, but you know every single word is a deliberate jab. Yes. He even flatters him, calling him not an ordinary murderer, but a monomaniac. Someone obsessed with a single destructive idea.
Porfiry is just playing the long game.
Yeah.
He never says, I suspect you. He knows that ambiguity is way more torturous than just accusing him.
He basically says he's just waiting for Raskolnikov's own conscience, his own sickness, to force the truth out.
And right when Raskolnikov is at his breaking point, we get that bizarre twist. The false confession.
Right, the painter Nikolai confesses to the whole thing.
Why? Why does he do that?
Well, this is Dostoevsky making a thematic point. Nikolai is an old believer, a dissenter, part of a religious group known for seeking out suffering as a path to redemption. He confesses because he feels a deep spiritual need to suffer.
So it's the perfect foil. Raskolnikov commits a crime to prove he's above suffering, and Nikolai confesses to a crime he didn't commit specifically to suffer.
Porfiry sees it immediately. He knows Nikolai is innocent, but he plays along for a bit just to keep Raskolnikov completely off balance.
Meanwhile, that dark mirror, Svidrigailov, is still out there. And his story comes to this terrifying climax when he corners Dunya.
Yeah, he locks her in his rooms and tries to blackmail her, to corrupt her. He thinks he's the only one who really understands transgression.
But Dunya fights back. She escapes. And that moment, her refusal to be corrupted, it just breaks something in him.
He realizes he has no path to redemption. His brand of nihilism just leads to a dead end, a void.
So he tries to have this philosophical exit. He gives a bunch of money to Sonia, sets up funds for the orphans, a final, twisted good deed.
But it's empty. His final moments are just cynical. He writes this detailed suicide note saying he dies in full possession of his faculties.
And then shoots himself in front of a sentry.
Yeah. And that cynical death, that philosophical suicide, is the final shock that Raskolnikov needs. It forces him to see that his extraordinary man theory only leads to two places: madness or self-destruction.
Okay, so the real world just comes crashing in. Svidrigailov's suicide, Katerina Ivanovna's horrific public death. It all shatters Raskolnikov's theoretical bubble.
He has to confront what he's done. He finally goes to Sonia to confess. But even then, he's still clinging to his pride.
He tells her he killed the pawnbroker, but he's defiant about it.
He is. He insists it wasn't a crime, but an atonement for 40 sins, because the old woman was a noxious insect. He still sees it as a mistake in calculation, not a moral failure.
But Sonia's response,
Yeah.
it's really the spiritual heart of the whole book.
It is. She's horrified, of course, but she immediately embraces him. She doesn't condemn him. She shows him a path forward. She tells him to confess and to take up suffering.
Her faith is the antidote to his pride.
It is. She reads him the story of Lazarus from the Bible, which is all about resurrection through faith. At first, Raskolnikov just laughs at the idea of public penance. He still thinks suffering is something to be avoided.
But he's broken, even if he can't admit it yet. He goes to the police station, not to Porphyry, but to the explosive lieutenant.
A much more direct, less intellectual confrontation. And he makes a full, straightforward confession.
And then the trial reveals all these surprising things about him.
Yeah, we learn he'd used his last money to help a sick student, paid for his father's funeral, and, most importantly, he'd rescued 2 kids from a fire and gotten burned himself.
So he wasn't just this monster. The jury sees his crime as the result of an abnormal mental condition, not just greed. He gets a merciful sentence. 8 years in Siberia.
We find out he never even used the stolen money. It was never about the money. It was always about the theory.
And life starts to reorder itself. Dunya marries Razumihin, and they plan to follow Raskolnikov to Siberia.
But redemption isn't instant. This is what's so realistic about the book. In the epilogue, in prison, Raskolnikov is still cold and cynical. He tortures Sonia with his contempt.
He doesn't regret the murder itself, but his own cowardice, his failure to be the extraordinary man. His pride is still the main thing that's wounded.
It takes a long time, a severe illness, and just the constant, patient, infant love from Sonia to finally break through that intellectual armor. And in the moment he finally realizes he loves her, the theory is shattered.
That's where we get that incredible line.
Yes. Life had stepped into the place of theory, and something quite different would work itself out in his mind. He's finally ready to stop thinking and start feeling, to suffer, and to truly begin living.
What an immense journey, from that dark Petersburg cupboard all the way to the steppes of Siberia. We've tracked his path from this lofty, theoretical murderer to a common convict who is just maybe finally finding grace. So you now have the context, this destructive mix of poverty, intellectual pride, and selfless love that defines Dostoevsky's vision.
You know, Raskolnikov spent the whole book trying to prove that great men shouldn't have to suffer. He wanted power without any personal cost. But he only found real transformation when he finally accepted the need for immense suffering. And that leaves us with a question, I think. A question for you. If the goal is genuine change in your own life, is that ever possible without enduring some kind of profound personal cost? What burden must you bear to find your own redemption?